And Ruth Davidson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I would like to add my condolences to the loved ones of those who have died. Presiding Officer, this week we heard more allegations about the scandal engulfing Nicola Sturgeon's government. Yesterday at her press conference, the First Minister refused to address the substance but claimed to refute the allegations. Now, it's been a while since I was a journalist, but back then refute meant to prove a statement wrong, and I don't think its meaning has changed since then. So I'm going to ask the same question that the journalist asked yesterday, which the First Minister refused to answer, and maybe she can properly refute it now. It has been alleged that a legal document had been deliberately withdrawn, in other words suppressed, from being handed over to a court by government officials. Is that something that the First Minister knows happened, and is that not a summary dismissal offence?
First Minister.
It didn't happen, and I'll come back to that point in a minute. I'm actually quite astounded that Ruth Davidson hasn't seen the position that has now been narrated about that. But can I say, first of all, Presiding Officer, that having David Davis, a Tory MP, reading out in the House of Commons under the protection of parliamentary privilege his old pal Alex Salmond's conspiracy theories about the sexual harassment allegations against him must be the very epitome of the old boys club. I have to say, holding this government to account is vital, but anyone who chooses to cheer that on should not pretend to have the interests of the women concerned at heart. Now, on to the specific question about the withheld document. That claim, as the government actually confirmed yesterday, is just factually inaccurate. David Davis claimed that a document was withheld. In fact, once we tracked down exactly what document was being talked about, what we discovered was that document was not withheld. That document was handed over to the court on the 21st of November 2018, production number 7.79. So there's the answer to Ruth Davidson's question. And I would just end, Presiding Officer, by saying this. Parliamentary privilege might confer all sorts of protection. Unfortunately for Mr Davis, it doesn't turn falsehood into fact.
Ruth Davidson.
Presiding Officer, I don't deal in conspiracies, I deal in facts, and it is a fact. It is a fact that her own lawyers said it was unexplained and frankly inexplicable that information had been kept from them. And while that's ground we've tread before, there is something that she hasn't been asked about, because it was only released to the Parliamentary Committee inquiry on Monday. A document dated the 4th of November, which hasn't been reported yet, and could have been released the whole time, instead sneaked out in the dog days of the inquiry's time. We don't know who the note's author is, because that's redacted, but we know it was sent to the very top of government and discusses whether officials really do have to comply with their duty of candour. So let me quote directly from it. They felt it better, more credible, less shifty looking if we proceed as proposed. And it goes on. It will probably all end up being out there anyway, and better to face it transparently than having this dragged out reluctantly and portrayed as a failed attempt at a cover-up. First Minister, why did the government go ahead with the attempt at the cover-up anyway?
First Minister.
I think everybody watching this will have noticed just how quickly Ruth Davidson moved on from the question she asked at the first occasion of asking, because she stood up and suggested, as David Davis did in the House of Commons earlier this week, that a document had been withheld. And then when I pointed out to her that that was factually inaccurate, including given her the production number of the document as it was handed over to the court on the 21st of November 2018, she's got the nerve to stand up here and say she deals in facts. I think people will see for themselves that that couldn't be further from the truth. And actually what she has just quoted, what that actually means is Council saying to Government, here's things we should hand over, and we should hand them over. I think actually it was amend pleadings, although I'll be corrected if I'm wrong on that, rather than have any suggestion that we're trying to cover up. So what did we do? We amended the pleadings. All of this is out there, of course, for people to see, because the thing is, people don't have to take Ruth Davidson's word for these things anymore. They don't have to take the word of the old boys club in the House of Commons anymore. They can go on to the website of the Scottish Government, the committee of this Parliament, and read all this for themselves, and then they can make up their own minds. But the fact of the matter is, David Davis made serious, specific allegations in the House of Commons this week, and they have completely fallen apart. And I actually think that should be something he is apologising for. He's been tweeting this morning where he's no longer even trying to defend the specific allegations, he's just shifting the goalpost. Shifty is definitely a word I would use today, but I would use it in relation to David Davis and Ruth Davidson.
Ruth Davidson.
So the First Minister says there's no cover-up, but 6 weeks after the note that I read out, her own lawyers said they hadn't complied with what the court told them to do. And still, we know that the First Minister attended a meeting on the 13th of November 2018 with legal counsel, and all records of that meeting have either vanished or been destroyed. It is beyond anyone's imagination that no notes were taken when the First Minister, her Chief of Staff, the Permanent Secretary and Queen's Counsel met. Is Nicola Sturgeon seriously trying to tell us this isn't a cover-up, when her own officials warned 6 weeks before key documents were finally dragged out of them that it would look like a failed attempt at a cover-up, when her own lawyers, under her instruction, made false statements before a judge because a key email was withheld despite emails around it in the same chain being disclosed, and when all of this would have stayed secret from the inquiry investigating it, but for the threat of John Swinney losing his job.
First Minister.
You know, Ruth Davidson gets more and more desperate on this issue every single week that passes. As one conspiracy theory after another is demolished and falls away, she just dredges the bottom of the barrel. The fact of the matter is here, this government did make a serious mistake. I have said that on a number of occasions. It's a serious mistake. I regret deeply. I do think a point that shouldn't be lost, though, is this. It's a mistake that was made in the course of the government trying to do the right thing. You know, in the world of the old boys club, that mistake would never have been made because the allegations would never have been investigated. They would have been swept under the carpet instead. That old boys club that Ruth Davidson is soon going to see a lot closer when she joins the House of Lords in just a few weeks' time. The fact of the matter is, scrutiny of this government on all of these things is vital and important. And as I said, people can go and read the documentation for themselves. You know, but every time that crosses over into buying into Alex Salmond's conspiracy theories, politicians have a choice to make there, and they're entitled to choose to do that, but they shouldn't pretend in doing that that they are standing up for the women at the heart of this issue. These women were let down. I've apologised for that, and I am determined to learn the lessons of it and to make sure this government learns the lessons of it.
Ruth Davidson.
Day by day, week by week, drip by drip, more evidence comes to light over how this matter has been mishandled by the First Minister and by her government. Allegations of legal documents being deliberately concealed. We've got the lawyers acting for the Scottish Government furious at making false statements to court because key evidence was withheld even from them. And now it's claimed that the First Minister's own Chief of Staff intervened in the scandal. But we only know this because the evidence wasn't published in the Parliament, but because it was published in another Parliament altogether. The evidence does mount up, as do the government's excuses, but nothing can excuse the way that the women at the heart of this were failed, nor the taxpayers' money that was wasted. And the one thing that's not happened is anyone in this government taking the responsibility that they should. The circumstances demand that somebody loses their job over this. Could be the Permanent Secretary, could be the First Minister's Chief of Staff, it could be the First Minister herself. But really, shouldn't it be all of them?
First Minister.
Well, of course, in just a few weeks' time, I will put myself before the verdict of the Scottish people. That's the ultimate accountability, the accountability Ruth Davidson is running away from, and never let us forget that. Now because Ruth Davidson has just stood up here again and mouthed another of the conspiracy theories in terms of my Chief of Staff. We heard yesterday from a complainer who had asked for the help of my Chief of Staff say categorically that what was being suggested by David Davis was, and I'm quoting here, fundamentally untrue and deliberately misrepresented. Now, Ruth Davidson, week after week, stands up here and claims that for her it's all about the women. Well, can I suggest to Ruth Davidson that if that is true, it's about time she started listening a bit more to the women at the heart of this and a bit less to Alex Salmond and his cronies. The fact of the matter is that Ruth Davidson and the Tories are not interested in the evidence over this. The day before I gave evidence to the Parliamentary Committee, Ruth Davidson and her colleagues said in terms that they were not interested in anything I had to say because they had made up their minds. At the heart of this is this fact, Presiding Officer. Ruth Davidson and the Conservatives are not interested in the women, they're not interested in evidence, they're only interested in using this as a political tool because, frankly, they've got nothing positive to put before the Scottish people. That is the reality.